Hello.
Hello, Heather. Patricia. We'll let some folks trickle in here. Hi, Jen. Hello, Tanu Sujan. Tell me if I got that right or even close. Alexander.
Hi, happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. See some new faces here, which is always awesome. Hello, Anupama. We'll let folks trickle in here for a minute. Um, First timers, give me a show of hands. Victoria, Patricia, Alexander, awesome. Heather, all right. Rodney, good to see you.
Hi, thank you.
All right, so I'm sure folks will be trickling in here. A lot of new faces in the crowd here today, which I'm really excited about. So my name's Eric. I run this Coffee with a Recruiter session on a weekly basis every Thursday, 3 p.m. Mountain Time. And this really got started off maybe 3 months ago. I'm part of the NSA, which is the Never Search Alone community of job seekers. And I was moderating two job search councils over the past 9 months. And one of the big things that came out of that was just how much there is a lack of understanding about the recruiting world, the recruiting process, the recruiting mindset. And I felt that a little information could go a long way. And so I get approached by job seekers all the time. And so this helps me help more folks, I guess, at scale, I guess, than I would be able to do sort of on a one-on-one basis, just simply because I don't have time or I don't have as much time. So that's how it got started. Usually the way I set this up is just sort of an AMA, ask me anything. So it's largely unstructured. Based on feedback that I've received from folks recently, I'm going to add a little bit more structure, starting with today, centered around certain topics. And so today I'm hoping to talk about this concept of most placeable candidate. And just a show of hands, if anybody's heard of this strategy or this tactic. Okay, good. Heather, Patricia. Okay, so I wanted to talk about this because it's really a tactic that recruiters use to, in the best case, really partner with job seekers so that they can break down barriers and land new clients, right? And why this is important because it sheds some light on sort of the incentive structure for recruiters, but also how you might be able to partner with a recruiter and in the best case, be an MPC or most placeable candidate in your job search. I want to be honest with you that being an MPC is, if you think about a normal distribution of talent out there, right? A lot of times MPC is largely reserved for the most strongest candidates. But that's not to say that this is not applicable for the general population, because there's ways that you can make yourself a more placeable candidate, and so a lot of this is very relevant. And so as I've sort of revisited what I know about this strategy and how it might apply to job seekers, I'm hoping to cover that today. And again, not to dispel with the whole ask me anything. I think any question is free reign here today, but I'm hoping to sort of uh, align our conversation here a little bit more around a topic, which is a little bit of a departure from what I've been doing in the past. So we'll see how it works, and we'll go from there. All right. Looks like we have a big group today. Usually I get anywhere from 10 to 15 normally, but we had like 20, 25 folks here. Um, let's see. There's some questions in the chat here, so let me just address that real quick. Um, yes. What I do with these recordings, I record these in Zoom and I make them available through YouTube. I do have a YouTube channel where I'm aggregating all of these recordings so folks can benefit from them if they're not able to join. I also do take these recordings and I transcribe them and I put them into my AI avatar. Um, if that's interesting to anyone, I will put the link in the chat here. And that avatar has been trained on all the previous episodes. And so instead of sorry about that, instead of pouring through all the recordings, you can simply ask it a question. And if that question's been addressed in previous sessions, it'll provide an answer there with some citing, like perplexity, which is pretty cool. Okay. Um, and if anybody has any sort of confidentiality concerns, feel free to use an alias or just turn off your video or whatnot. All right. Okay. Cool. Um, all right. So why don't we dive into this? I want to talk a little bit about MPC. I didn't have time to make a full-on beautiful slideshow or anything like that, but I will share my screen here because I do have notes that I want to share with everyone. So, and by the way, if you guys have any questions, just drop it in the chat. Usually you put it into a question board, but it's a little too much for me to manage right now. So just drop it into the chat and we can get to that. Okay, let me share my screen here. Okay, can everyone see my Google Doc here? Just a show of hands. All right, cool, cool. All right. So again, typically for those that are new to the group here, I typically schedule this for 30 minutes. I go a little bit over, but I do try to be concise and do try to be efficient about uh, addressing the breadth, but also depth of questions. It's still an art that I'm still trying to master, but anyway, let's move forward here. So most placeable candidate. So MPC, some of you have already heard about this. This is sort of a strategy that recruiters use when they're trying to leverage candidates that they may have in the pipeline in terms of landing new clients, either new clients or additional work with existing clients. So this is basically how it works. So let's say I have a requisition, I do a search. Let's just say it's for a senior UX designer. Okay, I build a pipeline for that. Usually, only one person gets hired, but I have a pipeline of folks that I think that I've interviewed that I think are strong. Maybe the next two or three folks behind that person gets hired, I think are very strong and address a unique market need. And so one thing I can do as a recruiter is I can go and shop them to prospective clients, right? And what that does is it gives me a way to get an internal decision maker. Maybe they're a hiring manager, maybe they're an HR person, maybe they're another recruiter. It gives me a way to get their attention. And ultimately, as a recruiter, what I want to do is I want to get a contract signed, right? And so in some ways, it's a partnership. In many ways, it's a partnership between me as a recruiter doing the MPC strategy and the candidate, right? Typically, the candidate is, well, they may be active, they may be inactive, but they have to be on board with this, right? And so what I would do is I would go to the candidate and say, hey, I'd like to be able to represent you. I'd like to be able to use your resume and shop it with, a few clients that I might have in mind, prospective clients that I have in mind, and approach them about an opportunity that could be much better than what you currently have. They say yes, they say no. If they say yes, great. I'll go ahead and start shopping them around. Now, one way so part of what I want to share today is really how you can position yourself to be a most or more placeable candidate, right? Like I said earlier, being a most placeable candidate can sometimes be a bit of a stretch, a reach, right? Because a lot of recruiters will really reserve that position for the best of the best, and so not what I mean by best of the best is they have a very focused niche and skill set that the market needs. right? And but there's still a lot of things that you can do as a candidate to really position yourself to be a more placeable candidate and making that recruiter's job easier in terms of representing you. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what the recruiter is doing, is they're trying to represent you with their client. And by the way, when I'm talking about recruiters, I'm talking about external recruiters, agency recruiters, which is where I have virtually all of my experience, in contrast to internal recruiters. And internal recruiters work for a single company that they are hiring for versus an agency which may have one to many clients, right? Or different companies that are hiring. Okay. So, and I know I'm speaking really fast here. Let me pull up the chat here because I do want to take questions in real time here. I don't want to wait to the end because I expect this to be sort of an engaging conversation where people can also bring their insights as well as questions. Let's see. Will these insights be shared? Yeah, they'll be shared. Okay, so yeah, most of the folks here are from Never Search Alone. That's usually where I promote this. Um, what is the value of recruiter ads? The recruiter ads, to what extent are there disadvantages for the candidate because the hiring manager would have to pay to hire a candidate? Yeah, so the whole art of like the MPC approach is very it's a bit nuanced, right? And there's no one way to play it. Generally speaking, the MPC approach is really to get the attention of a recruiter internally or a decision maker, an executive that could eventually sign a contract. A lot of times, what I'll do is I won't even push so much for the contract as much as just building goodwill with the hiring authority. So there's different ways to play that, right? In terms of being represented, what you want to do as a candidate is you want to make sure that you're aligning yourself with the right recruiter. Oftentimes, there's a sort of a if you think about the Jerry Maguire uh, movie. I mean, anybody out there that haven't seen Jerry Maguire? Yeah, everybody's seen the movie. It's a great movie. Basically, he's representing Rod Tidwell, right? That's his one client, and there's a high level of commitment between both of them. And Jerry is able to understand Rod's needs at a hyper personalized level, right? And so MPC has to have a high degree of trust and a high degree of understanding. It's very much a partnership between the candidate and the recruiter, right? And so to be a better MPC prospect, you need to be. And let me see. I'm looking at my notes here. Um, so you need to be you in order to be a strong contender for an MPC candidate. You have to be very focused in terms of what you're looking for. You have to have a great story that is focused, it's concrete, right? And so to the extent, and we talk a lot about this in the Never Search Alone community, right? Finding your candidate market fit and building out that statement. To the extent that you can do that in a very focused manner, that makes the recruiter's job a lot easier to present to you, right? Because hiring authorities don't hire generalists. They hire specialists for the particular need that they have. And eventually you end up becoming a generalist that can add value in other areas, but you really need to let that specialist aspect, that wow factor, really shine, right? And so if you can convince your recruiter of that narrative and of what you bring to the table that the market needs, then they can do that more effectively on your behalf as they go out to the marketplace to rep you. Okay. So concrete examples. Um, Another thing you can do is if you are drumming up leads yourself, that is huge for a recruiter, right? So if you're looking, I mean, I imagine if you're a job seeker, you're out there sort of looking for opportunities yourself, networking and so forth. Now, if you find an opportunity that is compelling for you, that you think you'd be a good fit for, you could take that to your recruiter that you're partnering with and say, "Hey, let's go after this. Well, I as a candidate want to go after this position, but you as a recruiter, you want to go after this client. So together we could be, we could support each other in this MPC approach, right? And so that could be another way to do it. And when you find a company that you are interested in, maybe they have a job opening, maybe they don't. But if you find a company that you're interested in, one thing that you can do is you can look at the people that are in that company, via LinkedIn, that are the star performers in the same department that you would be looking to go into. So let's say you're a designer, let's say you're a product manager. You can look for the other product managers at that company that are the star performers, right? And how do you determine whether they're a star performer? Well, I mean, there's different ways to do it, but one way to do it is you can look at how long they've been there and how many times they were promoted, or how many times their title changed, right? So let's say they were there for 2 years, or they've been there for 2 or 3 years, but they've had a title change, ideally a promotion, right? Chances are chances are they're probably a high performer, right? And so now, let's say the person's name is Steve, right? So now you have a person that is concrete. Steve is a star performer product manager at XYZ company. You can share that with your recruiter, and your recruiter now can reference Steve and say, "Hey, prospective client, guess what? I have another Steve for you." And that is so much more concrete, right? Because they already know what Steve's about. And so when you say, "I have another Steve for you," it's so much more concrete, and they know what to imagine in their mind. And it's like, yeah, we can use another Steve. Let's have a conversation. But if you go and you say, "Hey, yeah, I have another star product manager that he has 5 years experience and he's done this and this," it's a little bit more abstract. It's a lot more abstract. It's harder for them to really imagine or visualize uh, what you're talking about, right? So having a concrete example and using that approach that would be very valuable to me, for example, right? And so just stepping back for a second, a lot of what I'm sharing with you guys here is what is valuable to me as a recruiter, what makes my life easier, right? Because ultimately what I want to do as a recruiter is I want to find the right talent and I want to make that placement. That's how I get paid. That's how I'm incentivized, right? And so if you align your incentives with your understanding of the recruiter's incentives, there's a lot of opportunity for partnership, right? But again, trying to shed light on what those incentives are and how you can align yourself so that you can partner more effectively with the recruiter. Ultimately, whether you're working with an internal recruiter or an external recruiter, you want to make the recruiter's job easier. And what I'm sharing with here is some suggestions on how you can make the recruiter's job easier, because ultimately they want to find the right person. They want you to be that person. Once they're convinced, they want you to be that person, and they want to champion you internally and sort of work you through that process so you get hired, right? Um, so don't assume that it's always an adversarial thing with recruiters. Maybe in the beginning when they're trying to get to know you better, but once they're convinced, they want to champion you. So make it easier on them. Okay. Let's see. Will I be sharing this document? Sure, I'll share it. So I do have a mailing list. Obviously, you guys registered, and I do send an email before and after, and I'll include this in the post email. Thanks, Jaime. I really appreciate that. So Victoria, if you're trying to position yourself as more placeable, would it be a bad thing to position yourself as someone who wears many hats? I mean, that's a judgment call you have to make. Based on my experience and what I've seen, hiring authorities, recruiters tend to look for specialists. And specialists are people that meet the requirements of the job description very well, right? And so to say that you do other things outside of the job description is probably a detractor. And so, yeah, that's sort of my thought there. You have to be focused, right? And I know that's a big challenge, and that's a big challenge as part of the, finding your candidate market fit, using the NSA speak. And it really is worthwhile to spend time on finding your candidate market fit and defining your candidate market fit statement. The more, there's a saying, right? The riches are in the niches, and I really think that applies to job searching, because you are, I mean, not to be, I don't mean this in any demeaning way, but you are the product, right? And you need to sell yourself, and you need to identify that niche that you are positioning your skills and your expertise in, that the market needs, right? So let's see, what if you are starting out in a junior role and to emulate a star performer isn't really going to work? Yeah, that's just one suggestion, right? I mean, there may be folks there that are just past junior that and ideally you're moving into a role where it's not a lateral, like you're gunning for a position that is really your next step, right? And I know this market, a lot of the employers right now have the leverage, right? But this ebbs and flows. So for folks that are struggling out there, I know a lot of folks are struggling out there. Don't despair. This is cyclical, right? And so I've seen this over the past 11 years that I've been doing this. It's very cyclical. And so build those relationships, focus on first principles in terms of developing your skills. And I think one of the big challenges that job seekers have is they have amazing skills, they have amazing experience, but the challenge is how do they articulate that into a narrative that is compelling, right? And how do they articulate that into really a focused narrative, right? And a lot of that stems from that exercise that you do as part of the NSA with finding your candidate market fit statement. So I can't stress that enough. I've talked to too many folks, both inside the NSA and just even in the past, that have such a divergent or unfocused objective, right? And it really dampens my ability as a recruiter to understand where you might fit in. It dampens, there's people out there in your network that want to help you, but it dampens their ability to help you because they don't know necessarily what you stand for. If you stand for everything, you stand for nothing, right? That's the point. So you can't stand for everything. So you have to, and the challenge is what do you eliminate, right? So anyway, let's see. How do you think about prioritizing time between direct application, outreach, hiring managers, networking with folks in target companies? Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, this whole job search exercise is really, it is an exercise in balancing priorities and balancing your time and your energy, right? I think networking is very important. Direct application, it's a lot easier to do now than it was, say, 5 or 10 years ago. But it's if it's easy for you, it's easy for everybody else, right? And so one of the problems it's creating is that recruiters are getting inundated, right? And so you have to network. You have to be your own recruiter effectively. To the extent that you can partner with recruiters, more power to you, right? To the extent that you can turn people in your network into your eyes and ears for you, again, going back to a focused candidate market fit statement, then more power to you. Finding roles for and building relationships with these MPA, I think MPC is what you mean, recruiters. Um, yeah, I think the first step here, what I'm suggesting with the MPC approach, is really making it easier for recruiters, being more concrete about being more concrete about your narrative and your accomplishments. You have to be accomplishment led, right? Talking in abstractions about responsibilities and scope is great, but it has to be backed by concrete, quantifiable accomplishments, right? And ideally, it's hyper relevant to your candidate market fit statement, right? So I hope that helps. Let's see, David. In this market, I'm seeing specialist titles with more consolidation of generalist roles. For example, you'd be hard pressed to find a senior principal mobile developer role that doesn't also require full stack web and cloud. Should there be skilling up for those extra areas to be a more placeable candidate? Oh, that's an interesting question. Maybe a little bit contrast in terms of what I said about being more of a focused specialist in your particular area. So I mean, generally speaking, I would say you have to upskill in terms of what you're passionate about, but also keep your finger on the pulse of what the market needs, right? And give you an example, right? AI is all the hot stuff right now, and figuring out how to integrate AI into products or operations is really, people get excited about that right now. And so I wouldn't be surprised, if you're going through an interview process and people start querying you about your experience with AI, or what your thoughts are on AI, and how it's relevant to your role, or how it's relevant to your product, or how it's relevant to this or that. So to be able to have your finger on the pulse and what people are talking about and what's interesting to folks, it does signal that you are progressive and you're continually learning. And so personally speaking, as a recruiter, that's important to me, right? Historically, I've hired for a lot of earlier stage growth tech companies. So the position that we're hiring for today and the problem that needs to be solved today in that position is going to be different from the problem that needs to be solved tomorrow for that company because it's moving so fast. And so I place a premium on folks that are able to learn quickly and adapt quickly. And again, that maybe that's a little bit unique to the clients that I've worked with, but I would say, generally speaking, all things being equal, most people would want to hire someone that is learning new stuff and wants to learn new stuff, right? And can demonstrate that, concretely. Um, so you're saying that you're an external recruiter that is a broker who's working with an internal recruiter? So confused. I thought external recruiters started with a position, but they could start with the candidate with an NPC. Yeah. So if I could try to clarify here a little bit, so personally, I work as an external recruiter. I run an agency and we service multiple clients. Internal recruiters, depending on the size of the company, you may have a dedicated internal recruiter, you might not, right? If it's a smaller company, they might not even have a dedicated internal recruiter. The point is, as a job seeker, you need to understand the different kinds of recruiters, internal or external, and sort of how they operate and what their incentive structures are, right? So if you're working with an external recruiter, they may have access to multiple clients, multiple companies, whereas 99% of the internal recruiters are just representing one company. And so what I'm proposing here is if you can make yourself a more or most placeable candidate, there's potential for you to partner with external recruiters out there. External recruiters are interested in placing candidates into a requisition, into a role. Well, there's a term called full desk recruiter, and full desk recruiters are responsible for not only filling roles, but they're also responsible for developing new business. In other words, soliciting and closing new requisitions, right? So it's sort of the demand side and this and the supply side, right? So if I'm a full desk recruiter, I'm looking for the clients that need to hire. And once I close that, now I have a requisition. That's the demand side. Now I got to go fill that position. So I have to go to the supply side, which is, on the talent side, and find the talent to fill that position. So full desk includes, finding the requisitions and then filling them. So, so that's another question you can ask when you get called by a recruiter or you get approached by a recruiter, particularly a third party recruiter, agency recruiter, third party, agency recruiter, external recruiter, it's all synonymous. But if you're interacting with a third party or agency recruiter, one thing you can ask them is, are you a full desk recruiter? So if this is important because if they're a full desk recruiter, they have a higher probability of having line of sight with the hiring authority, right? There's no insulating layer between them. And why that's important is because they have access to the hiring authority. And when you ask a question about what the hiring authority is looking for, chances are they should know. If they're not a full desk recruiter and they have an account manager, for example, and they're a recruiter just working on the supply side, and you ask them a question about what the hiring manager is looking for, especially if it's a nuanced question that's not on the job description, chances are they might not know. They might not have any color on it either. They have to go to their account manager. Account manager has line of sight typically, and they have to go and ask that question. And sometimes the recruiter won't even surface it to the account manager, right? So knowing what kind of recruiter you're dealing with, full desk, do they have line of sight to the hiring authority? Super, super, super important, right? So if you're doing if you're trying to position yourself for for an NPC sort of approach, The only recruiters that are interested in NPC are the people that are full desk, right? Because they're responsible for not only filling the position, they're responsible for soliciting new positions altogether, right? And so that's important for you to understand as you're thinking about this. Um, let's see, how and where do we find such recruiters who would be open to working with us? So, generally speaking, if you position yourself as a specialist, and what I mean by specialist is you have a unique set of skills that are in demand. The recruiters will more often than not they'll find you, but I know that's tough right now. So what you can do is obviously try to position yourself. And when I say position yourself, you have to position yourself in terms of your online personal branding. That happens through your digital resume. It happens through your LinkedIn profile. It happens through content that you create for your LinkedIn profile, right? Being, creating content that positions you as an authority in a niche space where where you bring to bear specific skills that are specialized. If you can do that, and I know all of you can do that if you dig deep, um, the recruiters will find you and or they will be much more receptive to speaking with you when you reach out to them, right? And so if you so one way to, who would be open to working with us? So one way that you can sort of create a pitch deck, if you will, is some of these things that I've been talking about. But when you're approaching a recruiter, one thing you could pitch to them, again, this is how I'm thinking about what would be important to me, um, is if you have a lead, right? I've identified an opportunity with XYZ company. I don't have an in there. I don't know anybody there, but I think I'd be a great fit, and here's why. And if that recruiter works in that space, and what I mean by that space is either geographically or industry, right? If they work in that space, then you partnering with that recruiter could make a compelling NPC case, right? And so that's sort of the thought process there. Um, okay, seems like a lot of folks have to drop here. Um, let me just we're at the bottom of the hour here. Let me just kind of cruise through here. Again, for folks here, drop any questions that you feel might be top of mind for you guys into the meeting chat while I kind of scan sort of what I might be missing here from my notes. So candidate incentives. So one of the things, I don't think I talked about this, but in order to position yourself to be a more or most placeable candidate, you really want to find a long-term relationship with a recruiter. And there's a level of commitment. I go back to this whole Jerry Maguire thing. Rod and Jerry were hyper committed to each other, right? And so committed, communicative with each other, right? Be transparent with your recruiter, especially if you're partnering with him or her. Exclusive, that's another thing. Let's see. Discerning and not desperate. Discerning is really important because it signals to the recruiter that you are focused in what you're looking for. And it also signals, when you're discerning, it also signals that you're not desperate. And I know that, there's a lot of folks out there that are, leaning towards that desperate side, and I totally understand it. But you don't want to come across as desperate, right? So the way you do that is you focus on what you're looking for, and you have a niche, tight candidate market fit statement, and you really try to respect that. You really try to maintain those boundaries. And if there's an opportunity that's outside of that, do yourself a solid and say no, right? Again, that's a personal decision, judgment call that you have to make. But to the extent that you can respect those boundaries with your candidate market fit statement, you will be able to focus more energy on the yeses, right? I've seen way too many instances where people start chasing stuff and now they're all over the place, right? And so if it's not furthering what you're looking for, it's detracting, right? So that's what I'll say there. Be career oriented, not just job oriented. So to the extent that you can signal a partnership with the recruiter, that says, hey, I'm really career oriented. I'm in this for the long run. Yes, I need a job today or tomorrow or yesterday, but I'm really career oriented, right? This next job is probably just a stepping stone to my larger, getting me, closer to my, my career, my larger, longer term career objectives, right? And so to the extent that you can signal that you're not just job oriented, you're signaling to the recruiter that you want a longer term partnership, right? And so, and I'll tell you, I can't speak for all recruiters, but there is this phenomenon of, once somebody finds a job, recruiters never hear from that person anymore. Well, they might hear from them a year or two later, again when they need a job. And so so you don't want to be that person. Build a relationship with the recruiter and find the right recruiter and then preserve that, maintain it, right? And I'm not saying you have to be buddies and you know uh, emailing the person every week, but don't just fall off the cliff, right? Um, okay, so yeah, the Jerry Maguire approach. Don't sell a car by handing over the car manual. Sell the sizzle, right? And just going back to this whole ideal candidate, to the extent that you can signal this and demonstrate this to the recruiter, it gives them a really strong foundation for them to rep you, right? And so you want this is what you want to do, right? Um, Desperate, being needy. Yeah, what I mean by desperate is like you'll settle for whatever comes along your way. And I trust me, I know that some people are in this case right now and sort of financially pressured to take something, but you don't want to come across as that. I mean, that may be the case, but you don't want to come across as that because one of the concerns for the hiring manager and the recruiter is they don't want to lose you after 6 months when something better comes along, right? So once they feel like you're the right fit, great. We want we want you for the longer term. But the candidate, I mean, nobody wants you to be leaving after 6 months or 9 months or whatever, right? So desperate is really, I'll settle for anything right now. You don't want to come across as like that. And again, that's respecting your candidate market fit statement, right? Okay, I'm sure there's stuff I'm missing here. There's so much to talk about, but I have to jump. I hope this was helpful. I'll make this these notes available. I do send out an email, sort of a follow-up email. I appreciate all the engagement and the questions. And we'll do this every week. So I hope to see you guys next week. And I appreciate the engagement and I'll talk to you soon.